So page 486, number 3. Homeowners aged 40 to 50 are more likely to purchase ice cream and are more likely to purchase it in larger amounts than are members of any other demographic group. The popular belief that teenagers eat more ice cream than adults must therefore be false. So this is the one where I was talking about. Remember, we have our equation, evidence plus assumption equals conclusion. Oh, sorry, the question is, the argument is flawed primarily because the author does what? So the conclusion here is that teenagers eat more is false. The evidence is that 40 to 50 buy more. And here I'm just using shorthand. I don't need to write out ice cream. It's a short passage entirely about ice cream, so I didn't write it in there. The assumption or the logical leap that the author makes, and so this is what I was talking about watching for terms and shifts in ideas. Here we have buying in the evidence, and in the conclusion we have eating. So the assumption is really that, I should erase that, sorry. The assumption is that to buy ice cream equals to eat ice cream, when in fact it could be people aged 40 to 50 buying ice cream for their teenage children or grandchildren even in some cases. So this shift from buying to eating is part of the assumption, and that's potentially a flaw in the argument. Let's look for that in the answer choices. Choice A fails to distinguish between purchasing and consuming. Wow, well, that's totally it. Let's just look at the other ones, though. Is the argument flawed because the author does not supply information about homeowners in age groups other than 40 to 50? So this is outside the scope of the argument. Really, there was this bit of evidence contrary to this belief. What other demographic groups do is irrelevant to the argument. Choice C, does the argument depend on popular belief rather than on documented research findings? So this one's kind of tempting because, of course, the phrase popular belief does appear in the last sentence of the passage. However, the documented evidence is being used to undermine a belief. The argument is based on real evidence to contradict a belief, however wrongly. So the argument itself is not based on popular belief. It doesn't depend on popular belief. Choice D does not specify the precise amount of ice cream purchased by any demographic group. Again, you don't need to have the precise amount. It's enough to say in the research findings that the 40 to 50 age group is the one that purchases the most. You can make qualitative declarations like that without the quantitative data in front of you. And choice E discusses ice cream rather than more nutritious and healthful foods. Totally outside the scope of the passage. It's about the specific conclusion about who eats the most ice cream. So choice A. On to, I guess it's still, oops. Let's get rid of that. Nope, there. Still page 486 technically. Question number 4. According to a prediction of the not-so-distant future published in 1940, electricity would revolutionize agriculture. Electrodes would be inserted into the soil, and the current between them would kill bugs and weeds and make crop plants stronger. Which of the following, if true, most strongly indicates that the logic of the prediction above is flawed? Okay, so when you're asked to weaken or find the flaws in predictions and forecasts and plans, the way you weaken it typically is some problem with the system itself. You know, yes, you could say that it's flawed because space aliens could come down and destroy the Earth, or an asteroid or something like that. Yes, that is an assumption, and that is potentially a flaw. The plan might not work if that happened, but there is, on the GMAT anyway, the correct answer is something that is based on the terms of the plan or, in this case, prediction itself. Something's wrong with what we just read, what I just read and what you just heard. You may not be able to identify it, though, necessarily until you get to the answer choices, so it is okay to just go ahead and look. Choice A, in order for farmers to avoid electric shock while working in the fields, the current could be turned off at such times without diminishing the intended effects. So that's actually something that would make this more likely to work, not having farmers electrocuted, if it had this ability to be turned off. So this actually strengthens the argument. We need to find the flaw. Choice B, if the proposed plan for using electricity were put into practice, farmers would save on chemicals now being added to the soil. Also true, also strengthens the argument. Again, that says putting electricity into the ground would be awesome. That's not a flaw. Choice C, it cannot be taken for granted that the use of electricity is always beneficial. Well, you know, that's a good rule of thumb, actually, for life in general, for all sorts of dangerous things like electricity and fire and whatever. It won't always be beneficial, and you should be careful. However, that's not a logical flaw in the argument. Electricity can do, basically, what it says. It can kill bugs and weeds. It can kill a lot of things. So choice C, I mean, we'll keep it as a potential one, but it's not very strongly tied to the terms of the prediction. Choice D, since weeds are plants, electricity would affect weeds in the same way as it would affect crop plants. This is the sort of thing that we were looking for. Weeds are basically any plant that you don't want. In a rose garden, corn would be a weed. In a cornfield, a rose would be a weed. And so electricity's inability to differentiate between the two types of vegetation would actually be a flaw in the plan to put electrodes in every field. So this is actually a much better solution because it's tied to the terms of the prediction, like the details of the plan. And lastly, we'll check E. Because a planting machine would need to avoid coming into contact with the electrodes, new parts for planting machines would need to be designed. Well, you know, yeah, sure, that's great. It doesn't actually weaken the plan, though. Just because new parts would need to be designed doesn't mean that this plan wouldn't work. And in fact, it's really kind of a one-time cost and would potentially make life a lot easier for farmers, even with the addition of new planting machine parts. So it's not E. So again, the choice between D and C. C is a general cautionary thing about, hey, electricity can be trouble. Whereas choice D says, hey, you know, weeds are plants too, and electricity is not that smart. So choice D is our correct answer. On to page 4. Oh, I did it again. Go away. There we go. All right. Page 487. Question number 5. A company is considering changing its policy concerning daily working hours. Currently, this company requires all employees to arrive at work at 8 a.m. The proposed policy would permit each employee to decide when to arrive, from as early as 6 a.m. to as late as 11 a.m. The adoption of this policy would be most likely to decrease employees' productivity if the employees' job functions required them to. So another key strategy with critical reasoning is to pay very close attention to what appears in the question stem itself. Very often, they will focus the argument in very specific ways. Oftentimes that's the only place it's found. Other times, the passage may contain multiple arguments, and the question stem will identify for you which specific argument you need to strengthen or weaken or whatever. So I guess the strategy here isn't really a strategy so much as a sound practice. Do not skim the question stem. Use that in your process of paraphrasing what your task is. So in this particular case, the adoption of this policy would be most likely to decrease employees' productivity if their job required them to do this. We need an answer choice that would that if this is what the employees had to do, their productivity would go down. Okay, so it's not just something needs to be inconvenient. We need it to decrease their productivity. So choice A, if employees had to work without interruption from other employees. Well, actually having fewer employees around, if you're allowed to come in 5 hours earlier than your coworkers, you would get some quiet time. So, if anything, working without interruption from other employees, this would actually strengthen the argument rather than weaken it. Choice B, if they had to consult at least once a day with employees from other companies. So with a 5 hour window, assuming an 8 hour workday, that still allows at least a couple hours where every employee would be there around the noon hour. So employees would still be able to consult with each other at least once a day. That does not, this would not decrease, that job requirement would not decrease productivity. Choice C, submit their work for a supervisor's eventual approval. Well, eventual approval means it could be days later. So even if their work shift does not overlap chronologically with their supervisors, they just put it in the supervisor's desk or in the mailbox and it gets approved eventually. The word eventually there clearly makes C out of the question. Basically what we're looking for here is something that's going to require employees to be around each other at the same time more often. Having people come in at different times of the day would have people come, if they came in at all different times and their job required them to be there at the same time, that's like for a staff meeting or something, that would is likely to decrease productivity. Choice D, interact frequently with each other throughout the entire workday. So this sounds more likely actually. If they have to interact with each other throughout the workday and they're not there around each other the entire day, again with up to 5 hours difference, people coming in at 6 a.m. or 11 a.m., they wouldn't be around each other necessarily all the time. So D sounds like what we were hoping for. Or E, undertake projects that take several days to complete. That doesn't involve interacting with other employees, and so as long as they're putting the same amount of time in, choice E can't possibly be it. So choice D is the only one that uses the element of the original passage, which is to say we have these varying workday schedules. The flaw or the decrease in productivity needed to come from the idea that employees would no longer all be there at the same time, and choice D gives us that. If they need to be working with each other all day, not having everyone there all day makes that a lot harder.